All right.
We're not expecting that I need to remember all the formulas and how to use them.
So a prism is a polyhedron
Every time I hear hedron, I think of a hydra.
with exactly two congruent parallel faces, which we call the bases. Okay? And the bases can be any shape. So again, a prism is a polyhedron with exactly two congruent parallel faces that are bases. When you're looking at something, especially a picture of it, it does not have to be sitting on its base. Okay? In the triangular prism, the bases are the triangles, because they're the only ones that are parallel. So if I set the triangular prism on its side, that doesn't mean the base becomes what it's sitting on. The bases are still the parallel congruent faces. So you need to get your orientation straight to pick out the bases first before you do anything else. Okay, then the lateral faces are the other faces that are not bases. Okay, basically all the faces in between the bases are lateral faces. And those, for a prism, are always rectangular. So if you're looking at something and you are counting lateral faces that are rectangular or that are triangular, for instance, that's not correct. Your lateral faces should all be rectangles. And all prisms are named by the shape of their base. Okay, so I showed you the examples. We have triangular prisms, we have rectangular prisms, hexagonal, octagonal, pentagonal, etc. Okay? All right, so I want you to, you're going to do a couple sketches here. Don't worry too much about your artwork. In a rectangular prism, you really could count any pair of parallel faces as the bases because there are three pairs of parallel faces. Any set of parallel
It's just the bases and the
bases and faces, yeah. So, for this illustration, we're going to call those the bases. Because we need to represent something as the basis to discuss the height. The height of the prism is going to be denoted with a capital H. You need to be careful. Things get a little bit confusing because a lot of your shapes, like your base shapes, we find the area of those with the little base, little height.
Why not an HE for height?
Because then people would be looking for an E. What represents E? Do you know what I mean? So, big H is from the whole figure. Little h is from the base. So, height. Height of the prism, big H, is the distance between, actually we'll say the perpendicular distance between the bases. So on this diagram, everything that's not shaded in is a lateral face.
You may be recording, but yet you're getting no phone calls.
Yet. Yet.
Can't wait.
Okay. The other one that I want you to draw, because this is usually where people go wrong, these aren't as difficult, okay? But if you're always looking at the one that it seems to be the bottom and counting that as a base, that's not necessarily going to be correct. If we draw a triangular prism, so do a triangle, and then do a same size triangle up a little ways, connect your vertices. Okay. This rectangle is not the base. It's not parallel to anything, right? What actually would be parallel would be the two triangles. So in this case, the two triangles are your bases. So that's a base. That's a base. You'll notice the other three faces are rectangular. And the other area where people get into trouble is with the height. Where is the height? Yeah, it's between the bases. So the height is actually that distance, the height of the prism. All right, so that's just the preliminary information, being able to identify what we're using, what we're talking about. So now we're going to actually get into calculating the surface area.
First, I thought it was like
Surface area is the total outer area of the faces, all of them, including the bases. Or in other words, the sum of the area of each face. Okay, so again, the long way to find the surface area would be to calculate the area of every surface and add them together. The short way is, like I showed you, we could find the lateral area with 2 dimensions, and then we could add in the base areas. So, in general, surface area I'm going to list usually as SA, just as a reference. Surface area is found by doing the lateral area, which we'll talk about as LA, plus 2 of the base areas. So 2 times the base area, which is, I use BA. The book uses big B. But surface area SA, LA, BA is what I use. We're going to break this down further, but I would get in the habit of starting out with surface area equals lateral area plus 2 base areas. Okay, if you know that that's where you're starting, it's going to allow you to plug in the appropriate formulas for each part. Okay, so let's talk about our prism again. Your lateral area, and this works for every single prism, is the length of our big rectangle comes from the perimeter times the height of the prism. So perimeter times big H. So lateral area for a prism is perimeter times big H. And if you think you're going to forget what P is, write it off to the side. And then my base area, well, it depends on what shape your base is. If your base is a triangle, you need to use the formula for the area of a triangle. If your base is a rectangle, you use the formula for rectangle. If it's a octagon, then use the formula for an octagon, okay? So 2 times the area of your base. I leave that open because you're probably going to want to plug in whatever formula you need at that point.
So we're gonna have to find the area of like a square or a
A
hexagon.
triangle
And then we're gonna have to times it
by 2.
that's
Now, we'll probably give you a limited number of polygons, so we'll keep it to probably a rectangle, triangle, and a circle. Okay? But you should know how to do the other ones. Okay, I would identify your bases first, just so you know what you're using as your bases. Maybe shade them in. Okay, this is a square prism. Now, if all the dimensions were the same, it wouldn't be a square prism, it would be a cube, right? So, I would start by saying surface area is lateral area plus 2 base areas. And then we break it down. Lateral area comes from perimeter times big H. Well, perimeter is the perimeter of your base. What is the perimeter of the base? What shape is my base? It's a square. And the perimeter is the distance around. So what's the distance around? 5 times 4 or 20. Okay, so P equals 5 times 4 in this case. My height is the height of my prism, because I have to get that big rectangle covering my lateral, so that would be times 8. So my lateral area is 160 square units. That's covering everything but the bases at this point. Now I need to look at the bases. You said those are squares, so area of a square would be side squared, right? So 5 times 5. So my area for this base is 25. I've got 2 of them. So my total area for the bases would be 50. And if I add those together, my surface area is 210. We'll make this feet. So square feet. Now, if you were to break this down into all 6 faces and find the area of each and add it together, you should get 210. But it saved us some time to do the lateral area by itself and then the bases. Okay, another prism. Now watch how I draw this, because people second hour were like, what? Okay. Draw a right triangle. A right triangle, yeah. Now, easier on this one, go straight down from your vertices, the same amount, like so. And then connect those. You see it? What are my bases? What shape? The triangles, because the rectangles are not parallel at all. So that's a base, that's a base. All right, so surface area. Lateral area plus 2 base areas. Lateral area is perimeter times height. Okay, what's the problem with perimeter? We're missing a side. Yes, it is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. If you didn't know that, how could you find that third side to get the perimeter? The Pythagorean theorem. But if you're like, ooh, that 3, 4, 5 thing saves you some time. So that's got to be 5. So what is the perimeter of my base? A Pythagorean triple. When the legs are 3 and 4, the hypotenuse automatically has to be 5.
Oh, yeah.
Remember those triples?
Yeah.
If you know them, it saves you time. If not, you can still calculate the third side. Okay, so the perimeter is 3 plus 4 plus 5. The height of my prism is 6. So my lateral area should be 72. Okay, now we go back to our base. The shape of my base is a triangle, so I need to find the area of a triangle. So that's 1/2 little b, little h, little base and height of the triangle. So this is only pertaining to the triangle. Well, what's the base and height of my triangle? They have to be perpendicular, so 3 and 4. You're only looking at the base, remember. You're only looking at the base here. Don't look at the rest of the prism, just the base. So the base and height of that triangle are 3 and 4. So this would be 2 times 1/2 times 4 times 3. And if you're really paying attention, you're going to go, oh, isn't 2 times 1/2? Doesn't that cancel out? It does. So if you have a triangular prism, you really only have to do the base and height of the triangle to get the 2 base areas, because there are 2 of them. But if not, if you're like, oh, I got to do all of it, do all of it. So this would be 12. So my total surface area should be 84, we'll call this centimeters, square centimeters. Sounds like there's wind in here. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is make an adjustment for cylinders. This is why I am telling you, if you understand the general formula, it can be adapted for any shape base, okay? So let's turn our focus to cylinders a minute. A cylinder is basically a prism with a circular, or with circular bases. Okay. Has the same properties and thankfully the same general formula. All right, so in the cylinder, your bases are circular. Your height is still the distance between the bases, right? Big H. So this is big H. Your formula is still lateral area plus 2 base areas. All that changes here is the perimeter is technically circumference, and the shape of the base is a circle. So the formula for circle for your bases. Okay, so instead of perimeter, because on the other we had perimeter times height, so this is really circumference times height, yes? Easy way to do circumference is pi d. What is the diameter? 6 inches. So 12 pi times the height of the cylinder, which is 9. So 9 times 12 is 108 pi. And I leave it in terms of pi. You'll see why in a second. So that's my lateral area. My base is just a circle, actually 2 of them. So I'm going to do 2 times pi r squared. My radius is 6, so squared is 36. And 36 times 2 is 72 pi. And if you leave them in terms of pi, because your lateral area and your base area both contain pi, then you can add them together. That would be 180 pi. If your answer is supposed to be in terms of pi, then you're done. If it's not in terms of pi, if it's to the 10th, then you just multiply those together and you're done. Okay, so this would be square inches. If you calculated that, 565.5 square inches. So sometimes in the book they ask for both. They want the answer in terms of pi and to the nearest tenth. So that is both.